This is a Sony VP1000. This is a 3/4 inch Matic video cassette player. It is a playback only device. Back in the early days of video, most of the companies, well, there wasn't many making these things. There was basically Sony and Panasonic and a couple of others. These were not a consumer item. These were used in broadcast stations and universities and schools and businesses. So they had two lines of machines. They had the recorders that were used by content creators to record tapes, and then they had a more inexpensive model, which was a couple $1,000s less than, and now these machines were several $1,000s at the time, but these were considerably cheaper than their recording cousins, because they didn't have to incorporate the recording circuits, and then they could be optimized for playback. And what they were used for is schools and universities and institutions and so forth, that where they would be sent out videotapes from their resource center, for example, for playing back in classrooms as they made the move away from 16mm film to 3/4 inch cassette. And I remember when I was, when I went through high school, we didn't even have these. We still had 16mm, and we had 1/2 inch open reel videotape, and 3/4 inch were just starting to come into service back in the mid-70s. This machine here goes back to the early to mid-70s. I got this from a cable station that I worked for, and we had one of these. This was actually in one of the producer's studios, or one of his offices. We had the Panasonic NV9800 series, which I have one of those as my recorder. We had those in our control room and studio where we edited our tapes on. But this machine here, which saw very, very little use, this was in one of the producer's offices, so that he could look at a tape, before it went to air, for example. He could just put it on his TV and look at it. I see I'm going to get interrupted by planes flying over every few minutes here, because I've got my door open. Anyway, this thing hasn't seen service in quite a while. I don't even know if it works or not, but I think you guys might like to see what the inner workings of this is. The last time I worked on this machine, the mechanism was getting gummed up, so I did free it up at the time, but it's probably in need of service again. So before I even plug it in, I'm going to take the top off it and just do a quick inspect. Because this machine started its life in broadcast, most stuff in broadcast is designed to be serviced and cleaned on a regular basis, so the engineers take all the screws out of the tops, so you can just lift the top off it, and this one's no different. I don't think this thing's had screws in it since the day it was received at the station that I worked at, because it was one of these things where the operator needed to be able to clean the heads on it, and engineer wanted easy access. As you can see, this machine is very clean inside. Let's just turn it around so you guys can see the inner workings. This is probably one of the cleanest and fewest hours 3/4 inch machines you are ever going to find. When I got this machine, and I've had this machine for a long time, I got this machine back in the mid-1980s. It had just been serviced by their engineers at the time when they sold it to me. They serviced this thing on, 1984. It would have been, September the 20th, 1984. And I think I probably bought this thing at 1985 or so. They had a garage sale where they were selling off old equipment, and I picked up a 16mm projector, and I picked up this unit, and I picked up those Conrack monitors that I've shown before. Dirt cheap, but this machine, in the time that it was at the station where I used to work, I think the time that I was working there, and I worked in that station for 3 years when I was in school, for a while part-time, and then I got on full-time there for a bit. But in the time that I was working in that station, I actually only saw this machine used twice. It would sit in one of the producer's offices. I'm going to strangle that dog if it keeps barking. It would sit in one of the producer's offices, but he never watched any programming in his office because he had a small TV in there. So anytime he wanted to watch a tape, he would go into the control room and watch it on one of our production monitors. He didn't trust he had a little Sony TV, and in his mind, the Sony TV didn't have a great picture because everything looked good on it. And that was one of the things the engineers would always say is, don't evaluate a tape on a Sony TV because everything looks good. And that's because the Sony Trinitron had such poor bandwidth on it that even if you had a tape that was terrible, it would look good on a Sony Trinitron. So he never used this machine. So again, the entire time that I was there, I only saw this machine used a couple times. It was basically only if he couldn't get in and use one of the ones in the studio because it was being used for something. Then he'd go to his office and kind of grumble and grunt and watch it. So this thing has very few hours on it. And since I've owned it, I've probably put less than 10 hours on this machine because I don't get a lot of 3/4 inch tapes to transfer. The other machine that I've got, the one that records, it probably has got more hours. Well, it definitely has more hours, but I've probably put more hours on it because I used to actually use it as a slave machine for making master tapes on for duplication, because it obviously delivered a better picture than using VHS as an intermediate format. Anyway, let's plug this thing in and see whether this thing even powers up. It should work fine, other than I think maybe the buttons here may be still sticking. So we power it up, and oh, turn on the power might help. Okay, it should have power now. If we look on the back of this thing though, you'll see that the outputs on this thing are a little different. It has PL259 connector for the video out, and you get your audio out left and right, and it has an RF output. I'm going to see if I can find an adapter for that. If not, I'm just going to have to hook it up with the RF output and go to the TV on channel 3. So, in case you guys are wondering what these things use for a tape, well, they use one of these big 3/4 inch tapes. This tape, if we want to compare the size, let's take a look at this and compare it to a beta and a VHS tape. There's a beta tape, and here is a VHS tape. So, by comparison, as you can see, it's much larger than both a beta tape and a VHS tape. The tape speed is 3 3/4 inches per second, and a full tape is 1 hour maximum, which was the same speed as the initial Betamax speed. The original beta was a 1 hour tape, and beta was basically, if you look at how this thing threads and compare it to the beta machine, I'll show you some shots from the SL8600 service that I just did so that you can compare the mechanism, because the two of them look almost identical, except for 3/4 inch pulls the tape this way, whereas beta pulls the tape the other way. And that's because beta plays left to right. 3/4 inch plays right to left. So this is your supply reel, this is your take up, so it goes backwards. This is a short 10-minute tape here, and it's just one that I recorded a year or so ago on the other machine. It's one of my time-lapse videos that I'm able to show. Let's just see whether this thing actually plays, because I haven't run this machine in a long time, so I don't know whether this thing's even going to work. But we'll find out pretty quick here. So we'll try rewind for, well, actually we'll try fast forward, because the tape probably is rewound already. Yes, there it goes. You can see the tape moving there. If I stop it, we'll go rewind. You'll see that, like VHS, it used a transparent leader, because that is how the machines sense the end of the tape. There's a light that shines right here that shines through the leader itself when you're in rewind to stop it. That also will cut the power if the tape were to break. So once the machine is loaded, if we press the play button, magic starts. Okay, well, that took a while to lock in there. It looks like my arm that pinches in the, or closes the pinch roller might be a little bit sticky, but this thing's playing. It's not playing perfect, but it is playing, as you can see. I'm getting a bit of a tracking error. Let's just try the tracking control and see whether that'll... We have tracking and skew that we can adjust on this thing. skew adjust the tension. Here's the controls I'm adjusting. So our skew control here, that adjusts the actual tension on the tape itself. When you turn the skew control to the right, you release the back tension. And when you turn the skew control to the left, you increase the back tension. We're not getting very good sound here, so I'm going to try cleaning the audio heads on this thing right now, because the sound is pretty muffled. So there's a good chance that we have some contamination of the audio head. So the audio head is right here. We're just going to clean this with a Q-tip soaked in alcohol, if I can get in here. It's kind of hard to get in there and trying to get a shot of it at the same time, but a little bit of dirt on there. So if we look down in here on the mechanism, I think this is probably where the mechanism is gummed up. That's what pushes the pinch roller into place. If you watch as a thread, you see the arm moving in real slow. Finally, it goes all the way in and engages the pinch roller. And that's improved my sound substantially from what it was before. I was just watching the tape here. This is the returning tape back to the cassette itself, and the tension is pretty low on that, but that's actually regulated by a tension arm over here on this side. That's what regulates the tension. But, oh, we got a problem here, Houston. I saw some tape slack there, so I think we better stop this thing and investigate why there's slack. If we want to make one of these bad boys think there's a tape in it when there's not, there's a little switch just back here that you can just press with your finger, and that will, normally the tape pushes it down, but I'm just going to push it down out of the way here and actually slip it down below the hole here on the back. That will make the machine think there's a tape in it, so that I can go through the motions. I can check to make sure that I've got torque, which I have plenty of torque, and I can even go into play. And as you can see, it's a little slow at engaging that pinch roller. We have a mechanism that some of the grease must have dried up on. I just have to find out which pin is slow, which point of failure, which one is moves it. Now it looks like it's moved by this lever back here. But one of these posts is going to be sticking, and I got to take this top piece off to find it. So as we know, this is a single motor design. Actually, I think there might be a separate loading motor on this thing that actually loads and unloads the actual mechanism. But the one main motor here has a little arrow to tell you which way to turn it. It turns the video head, it turns the capstan shaft, and it turns the take up and supply spools through a series of belts and tires. So what we need to do is I need to take the wooden cabinet off this unit in order to see the workings from below and find out which one of these levers is sticking. These machines are quite involved to take apart. I have to remove the front, take the knobs off there first. I have to remove the front nose piece, the bezel, and I have to remove the chassis from the wooden cabinet. So we'll start by removing the 4 screws. That hold the chassis or hold the bezel in place. I'm going to lift that up and lift this off. them up to take it off. Like that. Okay, now we've got the front bezel off so that I can remove the unit from the chassis. We also have screws in the base and on the rear that have to be removed in order to remove the chassis. So we'll take the screws out from the base first, and that'll allow me to remove the bottom cover. And then the screws from the back will allow me to actually lift the chassis out. And there's actually some handles on the chassis itself for that purpose. And now there's a couple screws in the back that have to also come out. These ones here come out. The size of those suckers, eh? And once we have those two screws removed, it's just a matter of lifting out the actual mechanism. And that's done by grabbing the lifting bars here and here. When you grab the lifting bars, the whole chassis just lifts out of the cabinet like that. Now with the chassis completely removed, the engineer is free to work on the unit. The unit actually has stand-up points on the side so that it can be stand up on end to be worked on. So you can turn it up on its side and work on it like this. Okay, now you have access to all the belts and pulleys. You want to see some heavy duty belts, check these suckers out. Okay, these units are how many years old? This thing's never had the belts replaced, or if they were replaced, it was when it was serviced in 1984. So what's that, what, 32 years ago, I guess now? If they were replaced. I don't know that the belts were ever replaced on this thing. Here's our motor. If I turn the motor shaft here, you'll see that the motor, through a belt, turns the drum. Just like on the old Betamax, through a reduction pulley, turns the capstan. And through this long round belt, turns the reels. It's really quite simple. Speed of the drum is actually controlled by a magnetic brake that's on the drum that can control the speed of it for tracking purposes. This little motor back here, this is the loading motor that operates through this belt down here and this pulley and idler assembly. That's what operates the loading ring to load and unload the tape. And this thing's all mechanical. There are mechanical levers all over the place on this thing and solenoids that control the different operations. Now that we have the unit out of the chassis, or the wooden box, so you can see these levers here and find out which one of these ones is sticking. One of these levers, I'm sure I'm going to find, is gummed up, and that is why the pinch roller is not engaging. So this is the lever here that presses the pinch roller into place. And I'm just curious why it doesn't appear to be gummed up here. I'm just going to run this thing through motions and see what drives it. Is it the loading belt that's slipping on this side? Like, what operates that thing? Something is there's a cam or something that's driving that's not working properly. If we observe the operation, watch the lever here. This lever will start to move in, to pull the tape in, to engage it. Right? But something appears to be slipping. We have to question what's driving that. Well, I think it's being driven by the main motor. Let's stop the main motor and see whether it moves. Okay, main motor's trying to turn on. We have no movement until I release the main motor. That is being driven by the main motor to engage the pinch roller. So how, you might wonder, Well, I'll show you how. This is engineering 101. This is really, they thought about this. They could have gone the easy way and just put a solenoid in there. I mean, they got solenoids everywhere else. Why not just have a solenoid that engages the pinch roller? That would make things easy, right? So here's a clue. Underneath the capstan flywheel, it's hard to see on camera, but there's a roller back here. See that roller that I just moved with my finger? When you engage play, watch what happens. The motor will turn on. See that roller? That roller kicks into place. That is what activates the pinch roller. That's what engages the pinch roller for play. And that's going to move an arm up here, and I bet you that arm is sticking. The lever is down here and it is not sticking. I can move it freely. So it may be that it might be this roller itself underneath the capstan here. Weird. Let's just see if we can turn this thing by hand and put it through its motions. I think it's more on the line that my idler tire is actually slipping. If I turn it on and let it thread up, I think the idler tire here is actually slipping. So let's try putting some rubber renew on that idler tire and see if we can sticken that up a bit and make it so that it's not slipping. You see, now it went in and engaged this time. So I'm just going to get my rubber renew out and we'll put some of that on that idler tire. See if that'll fix this up. Okay, I got in there some rubber renew. Let's just see how this wheel turns properly now. Looks like it's working better now. A lot of crap did come off that idler. Let's just put the unit back on its feet. Let's see how this thing loads up now. Still kind of slow. We'll try putting some more rubber renew on it again and see whether it'll clean up a little more. I just did the one thing you're not supposed to do, get the stuff on your hands. Stuff is not good for you. That's for sure. Which button I press? As you can see, this thing's coming clean. Okay, let's try it now that I put the rubber renew on that rubber idler tire underneath the mechanism. Let's see if it, yes, that's working a little better. Now I still have to solve this problem with the take-up spool, but that's probably going to be a belt, but we got one problem resolved here. Of course, this is what can happen if you're not careful. The tape, I had it on its side and the tape dropped off the guides, which can create quite a problem, a mess of loose tape, which I have to now get back where it's supposed to go. I don't want to damage it. Okay, that's supposed to go like this. Okay, that's better. That's better. Okay, now when I power it up, it should wind the tape back in to its cassette, which it does. Okay, I just put some rubber renew on the idler tire between the take-up and supply spools, and that seems to have solved my tension problem for my tape. Lots of take-up tension. Now, take-up tension is actually regulated by this little arm here. If the tension is too high, it pulls the arm that way, which will reduce the tension. Watch what happens if I push the arm over, it'll actually start to drop the tape down. See that? So that, when it moves this way, it increases the tension, which it does. It does increase the tension. Now I'm touching the back surface of the tape here. The recording surface is the front. That's what goes around the drum here. This is the back surface of the tape, so it won't hurt it by touching it. But as you can hear, the tape is playing now. It's not playing perfect. I've still got a bit of a tracking issue here. It's not bad, but I don't know what shape this tape is in. This tape was recorded a long time ago, and it is an old tape. And it is playing. So we'll try a few other tapes on this thing before throwing this thing back together. Looking from this angle underneath the drum right down there, you can see the brake coil. It's basically the same as on the Betamax. It's just a DC coil that provides a magnetic brake and uses basically a half of a shaded pole motor design. And you increase the current through that and it will slow the drum down. That is how they control the drum speed for the tracking on this thing, is just to vary the current through that coil. So the reason that we have a brake motor to slow down the drum is because the drum and the capstan are both turned from the same motor through a belt reduction system. The motor runs at a fixed speed. It's synchronized to the AC power frequency. As you can see, this one here is based for 60 Hertz. If it was used in a 50 Hertz country, the pulleys, the reduction pulleys, would be a different size, so that actually they wouldn't even need to do that. What am I thinking? I'm thinking audio tape. Audio reel-to-reel, you use different size pulleys to set your capstan speed, but the actual physical tape speed, I believe, on PAL is slower. It's not 3 3/4 inches per second. It's whatever percentage it is, running 10% slower. Because it's the ratio between the head drum and the capstan shaft that's important. That's what sets your track pitch for your video tracks. So the AC synchronous motor is going to spin at 1500 RPM in a 50 Hertz country, as opposed to 1800 RPM in a 60 Hertz country. So your drum and your capstan motor will spin proportionately slower in those countries, which would still correspond to the line speed, which is 1 frame every 30th of a second. Or 1 frame every 30th of a second in a 60 Hertz country, 1 frame, or 1 field, I should say, in a 50 Hertz country. So it takes 1 revolution of the drum to record a full frame. I have an audience. I'm not used to having neighbors walking his dog watching me film. So I look it over my shoulder here, and there's a guy watching me. So anyway, pretty straightforward. The drum itself, again, its speed needs to be regulated, because it's going to run a little bit faster than the actual motor itself, just by the gearing of the pulleys. And then the actual fine speed is controlled by that brake, which will add some drag to it and slow it down. And the belt is designed in such a way that it's not too tight a fit. It's designed to allow slippage. If I put the camera over here onto the monitor, you'll see that I can just, if I put my finger on here and slow it down, you'll see the tracking lines, right? So this is what the tracking control does. The tracking control allows fine control. And as you can see, it's looking good now on playback. But you know, it's amazing how old this machine is, and the fact that really, other than we had a couple of idlers that were slipping on this thing. Now I've had some of the levers have been gummed up on it. I fixed that a number of years ago. It wouldn't go into rewind, for example, and it was one of these levers down here was gummed up. So I lubricated that a few years ago. But basically, this machine's been sitting for 30 odd years without really much in the way of use. It's something that I haul out once in a blue moon when I get a 3/4 inch tape which I might see 1 or 2 tapes a year. It's the format itself is pretty much dead, except for some old archives. I have some old tapes so that are quite valuable to me. I have some old concert tapes. I have an old Miles Davis tape that was recorded back in the 1970s, and I have it on 3/4 inch. I've transferred it over to my computer, obviously, because I know these machines aren't going to be around forever, but I have a few tapes that have got some original stuff on it. I've got some old stuff from a news channel, like the All News Channel, which was before CNN. I have a live air check from All News Channel, and a few other things that people have sent me over the years that on 3/4 inch, which I've found interesting, so I've hung on to them, including a Chuck Berry concert, which I've got up on my YouTube channel. There was only a couple songs on it though, because the tape itself was in pretty rough shape, not stored properly and so forth. But anyway, that's the look at this 3/4 inch machine. We'll hit the stop button and you'll see it unload here. As you'll see, it actually tracks up pretty quick now. Press play, tape threads. There you go. In case any of you guys were wondering what I used on those idler tires, this is stuff here, Rubber Renew by MG Chemicals. And that's it, my tape's at the end. So now we can rewind it. This stuff works pretty good, but it's got all kinds of warnings on the back. So be cautious if you're using that stuff. You're supposed to wear gloves and stuff and not get it on your skin, which I just did, which is probably not a good thing, but I wouldn't wash my hands right away though. But there's all kinds of cautions about getting this stuff on your skin, so it could have harmful chemicals in it. I just found I found a 3/4 inch tape. This was probably one of the last productions that I did with my company when I was doing productions. I did a play, and this was one of the last productions that I did where I used 3/4 inch as a mastering format. Just happened to find this tape. So just so you can get a glimpse of some of the stuff that I did. This was, I guess it was a Christmas concert. I went in with a couple cameras and shot this and edited it all down. This was all shot on analog. This would have been all shot on beta and shot on multiple cameras, and it was then taken and it was edited and switched live using that MX1 mixer, and the output of the MX1 mixer was plugged into my NV9800 recorder, and that was it. This was say probably one of the last productions that I did from this machine. At this particular tape, you can see this one. The other tape I had in there was not a the other tape I had was that one, right? This one here, it's actually translucent tape, so you can actually see the tape reel. So I put it in play. You'll see that the tape spools from the supply spool on this side, take up spool over here. So the tape reel, the two reels actually turn opposite directions. So a full tape would be, this is a 30-minute tape, I believe. But yeah, this is a 30-minute tape. It says right on the back here 30. A full tape, this would be a full reel, and it would basically the tape almost completely touches. It overlaps. So as one reel empties, it fills up onto the other. That was a way that they tried to make the cassettes as small as possible by having overlapping reels. We go into fast forward. They always rewind a bit. There's fast forward and rewind. And that's the idler bearing there that needs to be lubricated from time to time. That's for the capstan itself. So that's the idler that reduces the speed for the capstan shaft itself. I just found another tape. I found a bunch of these tapes. I just found another tape. This is another one of my productions that I used to sell this tape commercially, actually. So this was the master tape to it, and it's just, I made an aquarium tape. Man, this tape's seen better days. It's been sitting around so long it doesn't even want to play back properly anymore. But yeah, that was this was one of my commercial tapes that I sold. This is before the days of YouTube, and this was sold on DVD. I sold literally thousands of copies of this tape on DVD. This was the master tape that I'd found here. Anyway, I'm satisfied that this thing's working. Let's get this machine back together. We'll just stop the tape and eject it. And now put it back into the wooden box. And that's usually a little easier when the wooden box is on the ground. So we'll just grab the machine by its handles. Just drop it right down into the box, just like that. Made servicing these machines a breeze for the engineer. First, the 2 anchor screws in the back. And place the 4 screws in the bottom. Incidentally, these machines weigh in about 70 pounds. They're not exactly light. Front cover goes on just like that. And we just have to lift the mechanism slightly. Feed the eject lever through. Have it open all the way. I don't think it's going to go on properly for some reason. Remember that. It was kind of an oddball when you had to kind of have it halfway up and halfway down in order to get the front cover on properly. But it will go on. And then you've got your front panel screws, tracking and skewing control. No, actually this is the eject lever. The skewing knob is missing. We'll plug it in and do one final check. And send it on its way. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next video.